In the 1950s, the US military attempted to make the absolute warmest boot possible, and 70 plus years later, it still remains arguably the warmest boot ever made. But it also failed quite miserably and somehow caused frostbite because it was so warm. So we're gonna cut this thing in half, run it through our test to really see what makes this the warmest boot ever made. Is it any different than the later bunny boot version? And why did this boot fail so absolutely miserably? So what is this boot? Well, the brand is Bata. The style is not the Mickey Mouse boot, it's the Extreme Cold Vapor Barrier Boot Type 1. They weigh a hefty 3 pounds, 1 ounce. I got these at my local surplus store for $65, but on eBay they go up near average maybe 100, 150. And I believe these boots were made in the United States because the Bata brand has a factory in Maryland, especially at the time, and the place that this was developed was in the United States, so I'm gonna guess it was made in the United States. And these were rated to withstand temperatures of negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 29 degrees Celsius. And thanks to Anvil for sponsoring this video, because we just released our Lasso Link neck strap, and I've been designing this thing on and off for like 4 years. And the reason we're designing it is because our most popular product that we sell is our camera harness that's ergonomically shaped to your body. Instead of just straight lines, it flows around your body, is really comfortable, so you can hold 2 really heavy cameras at the same time for like wedding photographers or wildlife photographers. And we never sold a neck strap. Over the last 4 years, I've been on and off designing this because I couldn't figure out a design that was really unique, really different, and combined all the strength of leather without any of the stiffness and the hard break-in. And that's where we came up with the Lasso Link design. And I love this thing. I think it turned out really great. And it's available in a bunch of different leathers, like this veg tan from Wicked and Craig. And the rest of these leathers are all from Seidel, who makes the world's toughest leather. It's why all the Pacific Northwest brands use their leather, which makes these straps really, really strong because we're using the exact same leather and the exact same thicknesses as some of the toughest boots in the entire world. And for the launch of this, it's gonna be a discounted launch because this is our first batch. It's kind of a testing phase. So instead of selling them at full price, I wanted to discount them so you guys get a neck strap for a lot cheaper. And so we only have 2,000 of these available, and this sale is gonna run from today all the way to the end of Black Friday or until they sell out. So check them out below, and thanks again for supporting this channel and all the products I make, because this is the whole reason I started this channel is because I love design, I love designing products, I like looking at other people's designs, and so I finally am able to get back to what I love most, which is designing really cool products. So thank you guys. So why did the US military go on this pursuit of making the absolute warmest boot possible? Well, the previous winter boot the US military used was the shoe pack boots that were used from 1938 all the way to 1945 during World War II. They were basically just LL Bean boots, but a little bit heavier duty. But the problem was they'd wear out really fast, and if any moisture got to the inside of the boot through the leather or the stitching, it would eventually freeze, giving the soldiers frostbite. So after that failure in World War II, they went back to the drawing boards for the Korean War that started in 1950, because they needed to make a boot that was waterproof, that was durable, and the warmest boot ever made by attacking the 3 ways that heat gets transferred. We'll use toaster as our example, actually, because it's your choice, you were on screen. First one is conduction, which is actual physical direct contact made with something cold or warm, in toaster's case, that transfers heat. The next one is convection, when movement of different temperature particles, whether it's a gas or liquid, like AC blowing on you or me, cooling down a little toasty. And the third one is radiation, when heat moves without contact or movement of particles, like when you put your hand close to a cat and you can feel its heat emanating off of it because it's so warm and cozy. Same concept. So that's when the Navy Clothing and Textile Research Center in Natick, Massachusetts came up with the idea of making a boot perform like the insulation in your house by fighting conduction, or touching direct contact with something cold. They solved that by the massive amount of wool that they put underneath your foot, by separating you as much as possible from the cold ground and preventing that heat transfer from your feet down to the ground. They fought the convection issue by fusing the inner rubber booty to the outer rubber booty, which creates a sealed air pocket between those 2 layers, which prevents any air from going in and out of the boot, similar to the outer brick wall of your house and the inner drywall of your house. But convection can still take place between those 2 layers, so to prevent that, they fill the air pocket with wool, just like that pink insulation behind the drywall in your house. And finally, radiation, which allegedly accounts for 65% of heat loss. And usually this is fixed by using one of those reflective radiation barriers like you see in emergency blankets, or the foil layer you sometimes see in people's houses. And I don't think this boot has any foil in any kind, or any radiation preventing the heat loss from your feet, so we'll see we get it cut in half. So now that the Navy Clothing and Textile Research Center had this concept of this monstrosity, they went to work actually making this boot, and they designed the first prototypes and ended up calling it the Extreme Cold Vapor Barrier Boots. but due to the large bulbous toe and the black design, they were just nicknamed the Mickey Mouse boots. And this new Mickey Mouse boot first saw serious action for the very first time in November of 1950 at the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, when the Chinese forces surprised the US and UN forces. For approximately 17 days, roughly 30,000 UN and Marines faced an enemy estimated around 120,000 over rugged terrain and lethally cold temperatures and harsh conditions. And on November 14th of 1950, a big cold front from Siberia descended down over the Chosin Reservoir, and temperatures plunged, according to estimates, to as low as -36 degrees Fahrenheit, which really put these boots to the test. And this cold front revealed a serious flaw in the new design. It wasn't that they were too cold, it was that they were too hot, because soldiers' feet got so hot during action that they sweat inside of their boot, and because it's a rubber boot, it didn't have any way to escape. And then as they stopped moving and were just sitting down or standing around, their feet slowly got cold, and that sweat on the inside of the boot eventually froze, causing very severe frostbite. So in 1951, they had to deal with this issue. So to fix that, they decided to add a fabric layer on the inside to absorb sweat, and started to heavily recommend soldiers change their socks at least once a day. And this also solved the issue of soldiers developing sores on their skin just from rubber on skin. Because if you ever move like sprinkler pipes in rubber boots without socks, it's like 4 steps and your skin is just rubbed raw. And just when they thought they'd solved all the problems with the world's warmest boots, a few years of active use revealed an even more catastrophic issue. Because allegedly some of these early boots were partially glued together, which over long periods of time exposed to cold temperatures, the glue would eventually shrink and crack and cause the boot to slowly delaminate. Even if it was just a tiny little hole, it was enough to cause serious and catastrophic problems for the heat retention of this boot. So that's when they moved to full vulcanized construction, where the rubbers actually fused together at high heat instead of glued together, which seems to work because these boots are 40 years old, and we tested it in the waterproof tank and it's still 100% waterproof. Then for the rest of the Korean War and the rest of the 50s, the boots remained mostly unchanged until the early 60s, when they finally addressed a flaw in the design that the government just did not want to address, seemingly, even though soldiers kept running into this issue time and time again due to the way the 2 rubber booty layers were sealed together. When a soldier would change elevation, especially when they're in an airplane of gaining elevation and dropping elevation, all that air trapped in between the 2 layers would expand or compress and occasionally cause the boot to rupture, which would take a lot, because we did the puncture test on these and it took 115 pounds to puncture through the upper and 169 pounds to puncture through the outsole. So after 10 years of having this issue, they finally came up with a solution, which is essentially just putting a little bike pump valve on the side of the boot, which would allow air to move in and move out. And for whatever reason, soldiers started to think that it was a smart idea to undo this valve and blow air into it to pump them up when they got really cold, which was not the intended purpose. And I just love all the really blatant instructions that they put on military boots, like this one: open, keep closed unless airborne, fold gusset this side only, keep double lace. And that's kind of an interesting one. The reason you do that, you double lace your boots so it stays really tight. You can do that with any boot. It's actually a nice little trick. You even got the sizing, the date of manufacturing, the batch number on the inside. I love the functionality of this kind of footwear. And just when this boot had reached its prime and finally fixed all those issues, they already started working on its replacement, the bunny boot, or the extreme cold vapor barrier boot type 2, which allegedly is even warmer than the Mickey Mouse boot, or the type 1, rated down to -65 degrees Fahrenheit. But I'm honestly not convinced that they're any different in any way, because the Mickey Mouse boots were clearly still being produced all the way up into at least 1985. And according to our research, they started making the bunny boot version in the 60s. So everyone says they're a different boot, but they sure seem almost identical. So we'll see when we get it cut in half. But one interesting thing about this boot is you might be watching this and think it's an old school boot that they used to make. But the crazy thing is there's one group in the US military who's still using these boots today. And they're worn by the 4th Brigade Combat Team Airborne 25th Infantry Division, which is completely crazy to me that after like 73 years, the US military is still relying on this boot. So let's cut these things in half and see if they really are any different than the bunny boots, and if it has any of that radiant foil on the inside. All right, we got it cut in half, and if you're not subscribed, consider doing it because it's a free little click and it makes a world of difference for us. It's how we continue to grow and pay to cut apart 2 pairs of boots and shoes every single week. So just push the little subscribe button if you haven't. So let's see what's inside. These boots are so ridiculous. Just look at the insulation. You have over an inch of just straight wool insulation underneath your foot. And this is one of these boots that just, I almost can't believe it exists because of all these little features and how ridiculous and over the top it is and how many were actually made and used by soldiers. To me, it's one of these things that could only be built and designed and optimized through the crucible of active wartime testing. Because otherwise you wouldn't find all these flaws and you wouldn't end up with this attempt at the warmest boot of all time. To me, it really is this modern military marvel that a lot of people don't fully appreciate because this boot is so ridiculous. Honestly, both of these boots are basically the exact same boot. Really the only difference is the bunny boot has just one extra layer of wool on the inside, has a little bit thicker rubber on the outside, and a slightly different tread pattern, and that's about it. They're surprisingly similar, and there is no radiation layer on the inside, unfortunately. So there is a little bit of room to make this boot even warmer, because we've seen modern winter boots use that foil that traps in that radiant heat when we did the winter boot showdown. So is this still the warmest boot in the world? Yeah, I think it is, and I think it's gonna stay at the top for a really long time, at least without electronics involved, because this is a purpose-built boot for the harshest conditions in the world for some of the toughest dudes in the world who put these through some of the most stringent testing conditions possible. And guess what's not really considered when you're doing that? Style. And I think to make a boot any warmer than this, it would have to be even more ridiculous. You'd end up looking like a pair of big red boots that Mischief made. And as much as I love that image of a bunch of like troops storming the enemy in insulated big red boots, unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna see that anytime soon. So let me know what you think, and if there's any additional information we missed in this, put it in the comments section, because the comment section is a great resource for people who are looking for additional information on these types of historical subjects. And thank you guys so much for supporting these historical boots. It's really cool to immortalize a part of the boot manufacturing history and processes and techniques and materials in a way that's never really been done before, and will hopefully stand the test of time more than just a pair of boots sitting on a shelf and being forgotten about. So thank you guys. And don't forget to check out the new Lasso Link camera strap that I designed, the link in the description. It's a really great way to support the channel and break out that old camera that's been sitting on your shelf collecting dust for the last 5 years. So thank you guys for everything you do. See ya.